welcome to Magicgatheringstrat. I am Dan, and today we're going to talk about the top 10 Magic the Gathering podcasts. And with me today I have Will. Hi, Will.
Hey.
Hey. Can you introduce yourself to the viewers?
Yep, I'm Will. I'm the creator of MTGO Strat. I'm just a regular casual player, semi-competitive, but I listen to a ton of Magic the Gathering podcasts because of my job and the amount of driving I do, so I'm looking forward to getting right into this.
Right on. We actually met when we created MTGOstrat.com back in January, but and we have been working together a lot, but we have never done a show before.
Nah, we've attempted to, but
several
many
times.
technical issues.
But now we're here, and we are going to talk about podcasts. So, first, what are the rules for making the top 10 list for podcasts? What I wanted to do here was there are good podcasts, but a good podcast delivers for at least some time, and some of them just die, and you can't tell from like 5 episodes how good a podcast really will be. So I set the rule of 11 episodes. Do you find that reasonable?
Oh, definitely. I mean, there are I see new new podcasts pop up on MTG Cast from time to time, and I try to listen to them, and then I go back to listen to them next week, and they're not there. So that's one of the worst things. So I think 11's a pretty reasonable number to have people as a qualifier to get onto the list.
It's fairly arbitrary, but I think 10 was a little bit too little, so I went for 11. There's also another problem. Podcasts die. And that's why I wanted a rule about having produced at least one episode for the last calendar year.
Yeah, there are some podcasts out there. I mean, even the Mothership's own podcast produces maybe 1 to 2 a year. So having them make at least one episode per calendar year is totally worth it. I mean, because there's a lot of good older podcasts out there that no longer record, but are way over 11 episodes, but they can't qualify now. I mean, they could go listeners can go back and try to find them through archives, but I think keeping with the current ones was the best idea.
And I want to mention that we're also quite open to feedback on these rules. So if you have opinions on them, please share them with us. We also decided that now that we use a voting system and a jury, we will run into ties. So we set the tiebreaker to be the number of published episodes, thus favoring older podcasts somewhat. And
you gotta give props out to the veterans, the guys that have been there for a long time.
I think they achieve some sort of flow when they are 100+ episodes. There's a big difference between the older shows. Everybody knows what they're doing, and they're just doing it.
Yeah.
Especially like Monday Night Magic, but we'll get back to that. So, what are we looking at when we're looking at podcasts? What do you like to hear in a podcast?
I mean, me personally, I like more strategies, tactics. I enjoy the occasional metagame update, but and definitely listening for new views on current decks or new combos that you can add, or rogue decks that might be popping up from time to time, things like that.
Yeah, I think metagame updates have their place, but everybody does them. There's so many metagame updates.
Yeah, I find myself fast forwarding through a lot because I'll listen to a podcast and they'll do GP recap. And every podcast just does the same thing, where they just read the top 8 deck lists I'm like, well, I already listened to this 14 times already, so I find myself fast forwarding through that a lot.
Yeah, I think that if you're going to report from tournaments, you should do it like Pit Imps does, because they go into depth on the tournament reports.
Yeah.
I also like entertainment, but I don't want entertainment to get into the way of strategy, and that
Oh yeah.
happens a lot.
Yeah. Tomfoolery's, is good, like splashed in there, but when it's just all nonsense all the time, it's a little difficult to listen to.
True. And I also think that if a podcast does something that is entirely unique, it's worth something. Absolutely, it makes it interesting.
Yeah.
And uniqueness is rare, I'd say, among podcasts. All right, for the first time we have a jury system. This means that we have 3 jury members. We have cast our votes on 15 podcasts, and we'll talk about the points later. And we want more jury members. We want jury members that listen to a lot of podcasts, yeah, at least 15. But we all 3 of us listen to like 25 at least.
Yeah.
I don't know how many podcasts I listen to. There are so many podcasts.
I can tell you that I'm looking at my like iTunes list right now, and there's 17 that I automatically download every week, and then I would say that I try to listen to 2 to 3 new ones a week, just so I can try to change it up. But when I recap that number just now, I'm kind of surprised about how many automatically get downloaded.
Yeah, that's somewhere in my range as well. But I have stopped listening to podcasts with less than 11 episodes.
Yeah, I mean, I try not to. I mean, whether or not I listen to all 17 that I download is another thing. But I try to get as many as I can whenever I can.
I also like to mention that Matti Paula is part of our jury. He couldn't make it today, but he has cast his votes and left his opinions. There were only 5 podcasts that we all voted on, so we have very different opinions. And that will mean that there are some changes in the list from last time. So, let's look at the podcast that got points but didn't make the list. And Will, can you go through the list?
Yeah, so we'll go for inverse order. Coming in at number 25 is Judge Cast. It got 16 points.
It's a very specialized podcast. Have you listened a lot to it?
No, I've listened to 1 or 2 episodes. I mean, it's really good for getting like a little bit better at tournament level Magic, because they go over a lot of like the layers and stuff like that. There was a lot of issues with I did listen to one of the episodes after after Dragon's Maze got released, where they were going over the turn and burn card because of like indestructibility and things like that. But
yeah. They did a really good episode where they went through all the decks in Modern, all the Tier 1 decks, and all the rules questions about them. But I think it's the best podcast if you're a judge, absolutely. But none of us are judges.
nah.
So, moving on.
So coming in number 24 is the Mana Pool. It got 20 vote.
It got
20
1 point. It was 20th place last time. That's what the figure in parentheses mean.
Oh, okay. Yeah, 1 point, 1 point. I don't really listen to this one either. I know that it's some of the guys from Monday Night Magic, but it's one of the ones that that's on my list if I ever if I run out of podcasts for a week to listen to, but I haven't listened to it yet.
It is quite similar to Monday Night Magic, I feel. Card Advantage?
That's another one I don't really listen to a ton. I have listened to it more recently I really, they go over, quite a few good talking points, but it's a little slow sometimes. I feel like they kind of drag on points, or they get a little bit distracted. I'm gonna probably start listening to them more now.
All right. I feel their opposite then is number 22, Freed from the Real. Uh,
Yeah,
they are so extremely brief that I can't resist listening to them, because you know that you can always listen to Freed from the Real because it ends immediately. But
yeah, it is. It goes quick.
it's packed with useful information, so I'm liking it more and more.
Yeah, and then coming in number 21 was Min Rage Magic. They got 7 points. They have 15 episodes. I mean, it's two casual F&M players in like the Chicago area. Uh, they don't go well. They kind of go into like depth on maybe like a couple of like rules every week. They talk a little bit. It's a little bit about everything. Like the casual player, I think would really enjoy it because they don't really go too deep into like strategy and things like that. But they do give like good like things that a casual player should look out for when at the F&M. Like, don't be afraid to talk to your like a judge, or organizing like trade binder, things like that.
Oh, do they cover all Friday Night Magic formats?
It's mostly standard because I don't know if their F&M, their primary F&M goes over like modern or draft. I know that actually, you know what, they do talk about draft sometimes. So,
Right.
but it's mostly just standard on there.
All right. Delving into draft is one of my favorites. It's on the casual side for a draft podcast, but it's from Scotland, and yeah, they keep entertaining me. They are quite a contrast to limited resources, and
Yeah,
they
I
are.
don't.
Yeah, sorry.
I was going to say I don't really listen to them that much. Draft's like not super high appealing to me, so that's something that you're going to have to kind of go into on.
Yeah, and that is one of the reasons we wanted to do the jury system, and why we need more jury members, so we get like all aspects of magic. The third power. What do you think of them?
I never even heard of them until I'm looking at this list right now.
And actually, I haven't either. So we should listen to the third power. This is Matti. It's a Cube podcast, of course,
Yeah,
and I don't do Cube.
yeah, me neither. Like
So
if if I was gonna do any kind of draft, it would definitely not be Cube. Not like I understand like the appeal of Cube, but I for like MTGO, uh, I don't understand how people can cube like pay money for a cube, not get any cards, and like not get any like real prizes.
yeah, the
I
expected
understand they
value
get
sucks.
minimal packs, but like I don't want more cube tickets.
I just discovered that the 25th position was actually Judgecast North, which is a, a more local version of Judgecast. And on 18 we have Judgecast. So let's move to number 17.
Yeah, Nerdivores. They just had their 100th episode yesterday. I
Oh,
listened to. They gave a lot of good things away. Prime speaker Zagana, Arouse Eric, Planeswalker. These guys are kind of like the mid-range Magic, except they're a lot more focused because their show is usually no more than 35 to 45 minutes. So they kind of go over, whatever they played at their last F&M and really stick to that deck. Maybe go over, a couple of talking points that are floating around the Magic community. But for the most part, they are very focused in on 1 to 2 decks per episode, and then just kind of cut it from there.
all right. Horde of Notions have been around for a while, and I think Chris Lansdale is quite a personality. Uh, it's I don't know what to say about Horde of Notions.
It's it's Horde of Notions. I mean,
Yeah, it just
it's a very
happens.
exactly.
So let's move on to East-West Draftcast. This is, if limited resources weren't around, this would be the best limited podcast. And they are constantly improving, and I think they are sufficiently different from limited resources. And one of the edges they actually had over limited resources, I don't know if they still have it though, with Brian Wong maybe coming on as a permanent host on limited resources, but they are actually higher ranked players. They are really good players, but they are not as good podcasters. So they have some useful insight on limited. I think number 14 here is a Matty podcast as well. Have you listened to Serious Vintage?
Nah, I don't even know about it.
So have you listened to Drive to Work?
Yeah, I love this podcast. This is like a pet podcast of mine. I mean, Mark Rosewater, he brings something interesting to the table every week, kind of like peeling back the curtains of Magic the Gathering. His last episode, which he has like a series, and he calls it Lessons Learned, where he goes over like some of the old design flaws and like things that he's learned and how he's applied it to like future sets. Is very like, I don't know, interesting to me. Being so into Magic and never really going like digging deeper into like the research, development, and design part of it. Mark really puts in for a podcast that he does driving to work every day. It really does a lot for, you know, a 27 to 30 minute podcast.
It's very interesting, and if anyone doesn't know it, Mark Rosewater is the head designer for Magic the Gathering at Wizards of the Coast, and he does his podcast while driving to work. So he starts pulling out his driveway, and he stops when he reaches Wizards' office, and sometimes he isn't finished, and that's what we get. I think he's repeating himself quite a bit, as he has. I followed him. I met him actually in 1995, and while he was working for the Duelist. But he has this enormous energy and passion about Magic, and it really shines through in this podcast. So I can't really figure out why I'm not rating this higher.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that you probably wouldn't rate it higher because it doesn't really go over like strategy and things like that. It's more of like a uniqueness, maybe like not really entertaining because I mean he tries to be funny sometimes, but it doesn't really come across as well as I think he thinks it does.
I started following his Tumblr page actually.
Yeah, so did I. But Mark, he's great. He definitely has a passion for the game and development and design, and I really think that like every set that he's lead design on, it is always good.
I think people have quite a polarized view of him, so if you like Mark Rosewater, you will like this podcast. And it's a bit like looking at World War II documentaries. It's always fun, but you know all the stuff already. Oh, maybe that was just me. Let's move to Commander Cast.
I don't really. Because
Matti
I just
again,
started.
right?
No, I just started listening to this. I haven't put in a ton of time into it, but it's something that Commander is something that I kind of want to get into because I have a lot of cards, so I'm sure I can put together a couple of Commander decks, and a lot of people. It seems to be very popular, so I figured, why not? So I picked up this podcast to see, what they have to say about it. Maybe offer some deck strategies or, brewing ideas. But I'm still pretty relatively new to it, so we'll see.
I like the way they talk about the decks. It's something other podcasters could learn from. And even then, having to talk about the deck with the 99 different cards plus a commander, it's quite impressive.
Yeah.
And then heavy meta at 11.
Yeah, so this is your, out of all the podcasts, this is easily the most over the top, crazy, not for the faint of heart of podcasts. Especially like, did you listen to the episode 2 weeks ago after Matty had his cards stolen from his cube, and then he went to the coffee like the Canadian coffee shop to like meet the guy who his friend was like detaining there. And like, you gotta listen.
I haven't listened to that yet, but I can sort of imagine what it's like.
Oh yeah, it was very, very over the top, funny. I had to pull over on the side of the road because I was laughing so hard.
It is definitely a podcast which you will laugh at. They drink a lot during the podcast. They swear a lot. And they are just over the top. They take the drinking while podcasting thing furthest. Other podcasters drink while podcasting, but they drink more.
Yeah.
And they will sometimes just randomly fall into a drunk story for 15 minutes.
I think that they're more or less drinkers first and then podcasters second.
Do they know they're podcasting?
I don't even... Maybe.
All right, but these are the podcasts that didn't make it on the top 10 list. And let's talk about number 10 then.
Okay, so number 10 is the Pit Imps podcast. They do a lot of tournament coverage like we've mentioned previously. Each week they like to go over a couple of decks from the top 8 lists of either like a SEG, Open Event, Invitational, PTQ, GP, Pro Tour, things like that. They bring on occasional guests to help them out when they have a lot of stuff to talk about. But Will and Angelo by themselves do really good work. They have a lot of good synergies between them. I was surprised that between the three of us, they didn't make it up higher on our list.
No, I think they're also improving constantly. When they started out, they felt like a heavy metal clone, but they drink less and they cover tournaments better now. Also, I feel that they approach tournament coverage as if they were sport journalists. In some sense, it's much more. It's better tournament coverage than the other podcasts.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, they might read over a full deck list, but they really take the time and it's good for them because they're very knowledgeable players. It seems like that they know what cards are good or what makes like a specific deck different than say like the cookie cutter version of it. So like if standard Reanimator is playing something that isn't normally played, they're sure to pick up on those things, see why they would play that card, and see how it helped the deck along better than just like the regular version would.
Yeah, I want to do a special shout out here to Angelo because he has promised me a drunk draft for the YouTube channel, and he actually did a drunk draft. He went 3-0, and then he was too drunk to save the recording. So that figures. Moving on to number 9.
So number 9 is Pauper the People. This is like the number one Pauper podcast because pretty much it's only them and Pauper's Cage that exist for the format. I call them the bread and butter of Pauper. They got a lot more focus now that it's only the 3 hosts. Not that like Mikey didn't really add anything to it. It was just that because there was 4 guys on there, it was kind of tough to follow who was talking about what. But now that it's pretty much just Chris, Nate, and Peter, it's I don't know. I enjoy the podcast a lot.
Yeah, I think that's a danger that many podcasts fall into. That it's very hard to keep four people talking in an understandable manner. And I think some podcasts should think about that because some of them get very confusing.
Yeah.
We are closely associated with this podcast, and that's what I meant with close to our hearts here. You have been on the podcast, we are
Yep.
hosting the podcast, and Matti is the moderator of Pauper to the People's Forum. So I just wanted to bring that out into the light so
Oh yeah.
people
Yeah, I
know
mean,
it.
we they give me their episodes. They record pretty much every Monday night, pretty late. But they every morning I wake up Tuesday morning. There's the podcast. I got it, put it up on the site, publish it around the internet a little bit, and trying to just bring light to a really good fun format that maybe a lot of people don't know about or think that because it's only commons that it's not that interesting or there's not a lot of variety. But I would say that Pauper has maybe the most variety of all of the quote unquote eternal formats. It's a lot because Legacy has pretty much 3 decks right now that just take over the format, but Pauper, I mean, it could be the meta game shifts so much, and it's pretty easy to brew a new deck and then kind of sneak it in there, take over a couple of dailies, and then disappear just like that.
Yeah, it's absolutely a very interesting format, cheap to get into, etc. And if you want to know more about Pauper, just check out our site or the YouTube channel. Let's move on here, because I could talk about Pauper to the People, all day. At number 8, we have one of my favorites. It's Magic the Amateuring. This is the most casual Magic podcast there is, but they take it to. They are really good at being casual. So, have you listened much to them?
Ever since, I mean, I knew that they were going to be in somewhere on our list, so I put together a couple episodes and listened to them. I mean, you put on here that they're just a happy bunch, and I couldn't agree with you more about that. They seem to joke around with each other and just enjoy playing Magic as a whole. They're just a little bit too casual for me, so I don't really listen to them a ton. But you gotta like what they're doing because they do it well. They've been doing it for a while, so.
And I think they get away with certain jokes that male podcasters couldn't make.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely the most casual podcast, and give it a listen. I can't stop being entertained by them. It's I don't like casual podcasting too much, but I like this. At number 7, we have In Contention.
So this is like Star City Games' flagship podcast. They do a lot of meta stuff, especially with their own tournaments. So I enjoy it whenever they do modern events from time to time. Star City Games, so I try to listen to them because modern is now becoming my favorite format. But other than that, I don't really listen to them a ton. It is one of the 17 automatic downloads that I have, but it's usually high up on the list of priority that I listen to.
This is one. This is one of the. They are one of the masters of metagame updates.
Yeah, definitely.
I would say to new podcasters, don't try to do metagame updates because a lot of podcasts are already doing them so well. So do something else. Moving on, at number 6 we have So Many Insane Plays.
Yeah, so I just started listening to them 2 or 3 episodes ago. I love this podcast. Is just great. Just the way that they think about Magic is really very unique, and I mean, some of the stuff that they've brought up is very eye-opening at times.
I agree. I've also just started listening to this because of this show, and I can also see this moving up the list. It's there is a lot of talent there.
Yeah, definitely.
And at number 5 we have Monday Night Magic.
So this is MTGcast.com's I guess flagship podcast. This is pretty much the guys that host and run that site get together. They go over a bunch of like Magic news. They go over some deck recaps, finance, tournament reports, deck strategies. It's a little bit of everything, even a little bit of nonsense mixed in there from time to time. So it's a pretty good podcast.
Yeah, they are so experienced at podcasting. It's scary. They like never lose their cool. I really like it. I think MTG. If anyone doesn't know, MTGcast is the biggest site that hosts podcasts, and they have a lot of the podcasts on our list there. Right now, they are in a little bit of a controversy.
Yeah, they recently, I guess, to pay the bills because they do so much web traffic, just in terms of data, because so many people download and upload podcasts to them, and because of the amount of storage that they have, I guess they archive every single episode that you give, that you upload to them. So if you started a podcast at number 1 and you're up to, number 100, every one of those podcasts will be somewhere on their site for people to go back to and listen to from the start or go and reference. So I guess recently they had to look for a sponsor for the site, and they pretty much they put up a 30-second ad in front of every single podcast. And that was causing a lot of controversy with people where they already had sponsors for their own podcasts, and the sponsor for the individual's podcast was really conflicting with the podcast. MTGcast.com's sponsor, and so like Limited Resources had to leave the site, and a couple other podcasts had to leave the site. But I stand behind what they did. Maybe they could have went about it a little bit differently, but you got to pay the bills. So I mean that was an excellent idea for them. They had a very good resource that they can offer to an advertiser, so they took advantage of it.
I think the sponsor they choose as well caused some controversy.
Yeah, I think so too.
I was going to talk to you about hey, couldn't we host limited resources on MTGeostrat.com? But then I thought further about it, and I realized how much MTGcast actually does, and how much bandwidth, backups, and stuff they must pay for. So
so actually,
I never asked you.
I reached out to Marshall, and I sent him an email. I didn't get a response back saying that I'll host his podcast. No problem. I'll post it up there every single day for people to download and listen to. But I didn't get a response back from him. But I would have loved to have limited resources on our site. I mean, that's a phenomenal podcast, and everybody loves Marshall. So
yeah. So does this mean that we want more podcasts on MTGeostrat.com?
Yeah, it definitely does.
So podcasts out there, do you want to host your podcast? Talk to us.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely can't handle the amount that MTGcast.com does, but I'm definitely willing to listen to, or host like 3 or 4 more podcasts besides Pauper to the People.
What we do today is host Pauper to the People, and they are also on MTGcast, so they just pre-publish on MTGeostrat, and that works fine. But back to this top 10 list, and let's stop advertising for our own site. At number 4, we have a podcast that is not coming out too often. It's Pauper's Cage with 26 points. That's a lot.
Yeah, it seems that a lot of us voted for Pauper's Cage. I guess all three of us did.
Yes, it's one of the 5.
Yeah, when Dime Collector does an episode, he really puts in the time to make sure that he gets the proper guests to go over the deck that he wants to feature for that episode. And I mean, they really dig deep on a specific deck. Like the recap of the Simic Storm deck when it first came to light was so in depth that I actually picked up the deck, even though I hate to play Storm, just to see what it was what it was all about. And the recaps that they were doing really helped to give like a lot of insight into what the deck wants to do, how its matchups, how it fares in each matchup. Actually, they go over all of the matchups for each deck, and then they go over some of the sideboarding choices as well.
I'm so surprised that there isn't a podcast that does this for standard decks or for modern decks. Because what he does, Dime Collector, he brings in a player that has a lot of good tournament results, sit down with him, break down the deck, go through the sideboarding options, and go through everything. And he does it in a reasonable amount of time as well. So I'm really impressed with the format of this podcast. I really want to see a podcast like this for other formats. The closest I think we get is Commander Cast, actually.
Yeah, I would say so as well. Now you're kind of giving me an idea to maybe start a modern Cage podcast.
Do you know how much work there is in doing a podcast?
A lot of work. I mean, especially for modern, I would say, because their decks are a little bit more involved in trying to find, somebody that's a real specialist for each deck is a little bit different. I mean, I see the same names pop up on MTGO stats.com in modern, but it seems like they play a lot of different decks because the metagame for for modern shifts a lot. So maybe not. We'll see.
No. That's why we are doing a top 10 Magic Gathering podcast show instead of doing a podcast, because we don't have the time to do a podcast. But if you did a modern podcast, I will be very interested in it. Let's move on to number 3.
So number 3, the A team. I label them as this is my favorite podcast to listen to every single week. I will go through. I will take time out of my schedule to sit down and listen to them and just absorb everything that they have to say. They talk about decks in a very high level way. They go over whatever they're playing each week between either standard, modern, and it's kind of like a mix. It's a mix of everything. It's very unique. It's very funny. Jay Bush, he could be a real jerk from time to time. He kind of seems like he's a very good player, but he doesn't just doesn't give a crap about a lot of things. He can kind of be back and forth, and Medina brings a lot of finance talk and just casual, not casual, tournament level play to the thing. And I mean, you got KYT, who seems to be playing in a PTQ or a World Cup qualifier every week. So he's got a lot, he's got a deck or two to talk about from time to time. And then you have the glue that holds it all together. And Scott, I mean, he's an excellent host of a podcast. He kind of keeps the guys on track, but they kind of override them from time to time, and the podcast goes off the rails. But I I mean, I really enjoy this podcast and recommend it to anybody who wants to get into listening to some podcasts. This is definitely obviously one of the top 3 that I would recommend starting off with.
It has all the qualities of a very good podcast, and the guys know what they're doing for sure. And I think the only reason it's not higher than this is perhaps that it is quite broad.
Yeah.
And covers everything, which the top 2 podcasts do not. They are very specific. And at number 2 we have Brainstorm Brewery at the whooping 49 points. That's 18 points more than the A-Team.
Yeah, it looks like, between the 3 of us, we probably all rated it very high.
We did.
This is the best Magic the Gathering finance podcast there is. If you have any aspirations to get into MTG finance, this is the podcast you need to be listening to each and every week. I mean, they go over picks of the week. I've taken some of their picks of the week myself, invested heavily in the card, and watch it turn around and turn profit for me. I mean, they don't nail it every single time, but it's who can? It's very difficult to nail a card that's going to be bulk rate price now and then turn into Tarmogoyf later.
And that is something they cover as well. Your long-term expected value, your misses, your hits, etc. They cover everything about finance. The one complaint I might have about Brainstorm Brewery is that they have Marcel who knows Magic Online, but the other guys don't, and it is at least 80% about paper Magic.
Yeah, I mean, you could take a lot of the stuff that they say and apply it to Moto, but I feel like cards, especially newer formats, newer sets, they don't really rise in value as much as they do in paper as they do on Moto, because there's just so much more quantity, I feel like, and it's just easier accessibility to trade and to find those cards on Moto than it is to find them in paper.
Also, the redemption change might have a bigger effect than at least I first expected.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's another thing too, because cards that kind of stay in the in that realm, either online or paper, now are mostly just staying online, because I didn't think that them raising the redemption cost. What is it? It went from $10 to $25.
$5 to $25.
Well, I mean,
400%.
Yeah, it's $20 to take your whole online collection and turn it into paper. I kind of understood what Wizards is doing, because they want to keep a lot more cards online. But I didn't think that just raising that price by $20 would kind of. It's a lot easier to fill out a full collection, and it's probably cheaper to do that online than it is to do it in paper. So even you might pay 100 to 120 ticks online to get a recent to get a newer set fully put together, and then and then with the redemption you're paying 140 to 150 to have all of that in your hands. You could pay that in just a few cards if you do it in paper for the same set. So I don't understand why people are redeeming it less, but I guess that was it was just enough to deter them from doing it.
I do a finance show every now and then on YouTube, and one thing I started to think about, now we're getting into specifics of finance, and we won't do that too much, but
yeah.
I'm wondering if if Commander actually can boost prices online, or if the supply is so big that the effect of Commander is entirely different in paper than online. But I will know in a year or two. Back to Brainstorm Brewery. Do you have anything to add about the cast?
No, I mean, every Friday check them out on iTunes.
Yeah. So that puts us in the position to once again talk about the number one podcast. And it's the number one podcast by a huge margin. It's 64 points, 15 more than Brainstorm Brewery, and we all voted very highly for this one. And there is no suspense because everybody knows it. We've already talked about it 5 times in this show. It's limited resources.
Yeah, this is...
And you don't even play limited.
I don't. Yeah, limited is not even something that I play a lot of, and this is my this is the best podcast. I think I voted it number 2 on my list, only because I don't play limited as much. But the way that Marshall takes cards and how he looks at them and how he can explain that. Just does so much for even the constructed player because you start to see new lines of play. You know, he might have taken this line in a draft because he was forced into these 2 cards, but then you go, well, wow, that's a really good synergy. Why can't I build a deck around that? And then before you know it, some of the great decks of Standard are born.
Yeah, and this podcast is just so far ahead of the others. The way they talk about exactly what you need to hear is quite interesting. Even things I didn't know I needed to hear, they will bring up. And it has improved my draft game a lot.
Yeah, I've actually started doing some Phantom Seal drafts, just because they cost almost nothing to really get into, and not a lot of the hardcore drafters do
you mean Phantom Drafts or Phantom Sealed?
Oh, Phantom Sealed. I'm sorry.
Okay,
yeah, Phantom Sealed. Because not a lot of the the hardcore limited players get into those a lot. They're mostly 8-4s that they get into. So I've been going a lot of 2-1s in that, but I got in a couple. I got actually 2 nights ago. I did a 3-0 in RTR.
Oh.
Yeah, I kind of. It was the only one that was really firing off for whatever reason, but I was quite impressed with myself in that deck.
Yeah, I think it will be some time before this anybody else can take the top spot, because at episode 186 now, limited resources is actually improving as we speak.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, bringing on Brian Wong. I didn't think that he was going to find anybody as good as Locks, but Wong is just he is probably the smartest Magic player that I've ever had a chance to listen to before. And just like his first episode when he went over the 4 states of a card, whether it's helping you advance your board or helping you in a situation of parity or helping you get ahead from behind, just that ideas were so easy to apply into regular deck brewing that it's helped my game out a lot.
I have tweeted Marshall, and he replied, and I said that you have to keep Brian Wong as the host. And his answer was that he agreed pretty much. So I hope Brian is staying on. The episode you talk about, 184, I think, it inspired me to do a 10-hour show on YouTube when I reviewed Modern Masters. It was actually streamed on Twitch, so there was a lot of people involved in it as well. And we were talking Brian Wong language for 10 hours. Yeah, I'm quite impressed.
Yeah, me too.
I listened to the whole. I listened to all the back episodes of Limited Resources, and Ryan Spain, he had the first host was with Marshall for episode 1 to 90. He was very good, and John Laux was very good, and Brian Wong is also very good, and they're all good in different ways. And Marshall just makes it work.
Yeah, he does.
So one thing we added in April to this show was that we should have a featured host. And I asked you guys who the featured host would be, and I only had one rule. I said it mustn't be Marshall Sutcliffe of Limited Resources, because he was the featured host last show in April, and you both replied that the featured host should be Marshall Sutcliffe.
Yeah, I don't even know who else to like bring up.
Next month there will be someone else.
I guess like next time I'll bring up like Scotty from the A team, but Marshall he's such an excellent job. The Magic community should be thankful for having him. I don't think that there's anybody out there that has like one bad thing to say about him. His commentary for when he does live coverage of tournaments for Wizards on their stream is just like, it's the best. I mean, I can't wait for the day that I get to meet him and shake his hand, because he just does so much for this community. So he had to have my vote. Whether you told me I could have him be my vote or not, I wouldn't even have answered you if you told me it couldn't be Marshall. I would have just told you to leave it blank.
Okay, but next time there will be someone else.
Yeah, next time I'll put somebody else. But for my first one, I had to put Marshall.
And I think Marshall, being a poker player, being a guy that really thinks Magic is fun, he is, and he said this sometimes, I think, that he wants to be like every listener's eye and ears in the Magic community, and he sort of is. You feel that he talks to you, and he thinks like you want to think, and it's hard to explain. I listened to Men of Magic from April 2012 this morning, and the host of Men of Magic had like a 30-minute speech at the end of his interview with Marshall. When he disconnected Marshall, then he just spoke for 30 seconds, maybe a minute, about how great Marshall was. So I almost wanted to run that here, but there might be copyright issues with that. The guy is good for Magic.
Yeah, for sure.
So, that's the show. What did we miss? I think we've listened to every podcast of note that has 11 episodes. At least one of us has, but we might have missed something. So tell us what we have missed. And I think I have missed finance podcasts. There must be more podcasts about finance somewhere, and I want to find them.
Yeah, I mean, I've looked, like, I tried to, like, peel through all of, like, the MTG Cast podcasts and just read the descriptions when they pop up every week, so this way I can at least know, you know, what they would be talking about, and maybe, you know, stumble across something that really interests me, and I'll download it, and it'll be my new favorite podcast. But I have yet to find anything finance really related. I think it's a topic or a subject matter that people are pretty intimidated by, because they don't want to, you know, go onto a podcast, give people a bunch of, you know, picks or ideas, have them all be wrong, and then just get, like, flamed out of the community.
True.
Because if there's anything that a Magic player will voice its opinion about is when something is wrong, and you know, they'll be sure to jump all over your case about it.
Very true. If I am allowed to dream, I would like to see a Magic Online only finance podcast.
Yeah, that'd be something that definitely very interesting to listen to.
Well, thank you, Will, and we'll be doing that again later this year.
Yeah, can't wait. I think we should try to get, this is like kind of a thing out to all listeners of this. I think we need definitely at least 2 to 3 more jurors for this, so this way, you know, we can have notes on all of the podcasts, so this way when we get on here, you know, we're not stuck on a podcast that, you know, me and you never listened to, but if, you know, we have some other alternating opinions and things like that would really help us out, make this a lot better And I think this really provides a nice little service for the community that if they're new to Magic, that this is a podcast or an excellent way to really learn more about the game, about the community, and things like that. So I would definitely recommend listening to as many podcasts as you got time for. But if you had to listen to 3 or 4 or 5 podcasts, the top 5 on this list are definitely what you need to be listening to.
Absolutely, and I want to repeat that if you want to be on the jury and you listen to 15 or more podcasts, let us know. I also like to thank PureMTGO.com because they are now hosting this, and they did it despite them being sponsors of several podcasts that and some of them we haven't rated that high. So thanks to PureMTGO.
Yeah, thanks.
And see you later this year.
Excellent. See you later.